KLTV soundcheck, KLTV soundcheck.
meeting of the BOCC. If you want to join me, rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I'll ask Commissioner Mortensen for a review of the minutes.
Played back what I said last week, includes good morning and all that, and I move to approve those minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Any questions? Corrections? Not seeing any, we'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
I also vote aye. I'll run down the consent agenda for you. Call for hearing. We have a call for public hearing to consider a surface mine ordinance scheduled May 14th. May 14th, 2024 at 10 a.m. in this room. Call for bids for our 2024 countywide pavement overlay project. That call for bids is scheduled for May 22nd, 2024. Agreements, contracts, bid awards, signed certificate of Cowlitz County for the Three Rivers Regional Wastewater Authority. They're going out for a bond to finance a portion of their facility for biosolids. And we're part of that authority in a small amount. So they required our signature. Board correspondence. We have quite a few. A through E is all from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to Pacific Corps, which manages the dams up at Swift. First one is gauge inspection report recommendation plan. This is a response to a Pacific Corps letter from last November. B is a review comment plan and schedule for Merwin, Yale, and Swift. Basically, the plan schedule, it was approved. Gate inspection report, recommended extension of time was approved. This was generated from a letter by Pacific Corps from November. Uh, 2003 dam inspection follow-up plan and schedule for the Yale project, and a revised DPP, I looked it up, drilling program plan is authorized for Weir and Swift. F, we appointed Christine Schott to the Board of Equalization. G, we appointed Rhonda Black to the Homeless Housing Task Force. H, we sent a letter to Holly Hillman thanking her for her application for the Homeless Housing Task Force, but that position had been filled. There's no openings. We sent a letter of support for the Port of Woodland to Senator Maria Catwell regarding some of the port infrastructure development program. And we sent a letter of recommendation. We were just part of a big group that sent a letter of recommendation to the Department of Ecology for the floodplains by design plan. This is a plan they want to do some restoration work at the headquarters of the Toutle River. The goal is to keep just under 5 million cubic yards of spoils from coming down. That's consent agenda items. Any questions on any of those?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on the letters and notices we get from FERC on the hydroelectric projects on Lewis River, Swift number 2, I believe, is the one that's operated by Cowlitz County PUD. The rest of them are all
Pacific Core?
Pacific Core. And the Cowlitz PUD takes a portion of the water dammed up behind, I think it's Yale. And they have their own generating plant. That's
Gotcha.
been an important part of the Cowlitz PUD's overall power supply system. And then on the last one, the floodplain by designs is an attempt to simplify the permitting process. There can be a whole number of different smaller projects all throughout those two valleys. And by kind of coordinating all of them, they go through the SEPA process just once for all the various different projects. So rather than having a SEPA project for every single one, SEPA is the State Environmental Protection Act that requires impact statements and reviews. Long and costly, so if you can do it once to cover a whole area, that's more efficient. So that's what the LC, Lower Columbia Fish Enhancement Group is trying to do to improve fish runs on both of those forks.
Just a comment on that last one. We were happy to sign that letter, but it's never clear to me whether it's good to put everything together like that, get one permit, because we always try and squeeze one size fits all kind of stuff, and I get a little queasy over that, but that's neither here nor there. I did want to comment on the FERC letters. Just when I first came on board, I would read them as carefully as could be, and they were almost 99% perfunctory. There was things like you said you were going to do this and you did. Congratulations, or just benign stuff. And every now and then an interesting thing comes by, and I would send it to people up in the Ariel and in the Cougar area, because that's the ones that might be concerned. The reason this happens, it's a very, I mean, the dams are very important, but they're also a fight against nature. And whenever you do that, you got to keep a constant eye, because nature's going to do what it wants to do, and dams do leak, dams do fail, sluice gates don't work all the time, generators don't work all the time, and they just try to keep us up to date on that. Recently, not included here, I think, are some we saw earlier this week. There's so many you got to cross correlate and say, have I seen this one before or not? And a problem I have with this is too much information makes it easier to dismiss stuff. So while we see it, we really have to pore through to figure out, is this something alarming or not? And I'm in favor of adequate information, but not the surplus of useless information.
So the constant testing is a result of a federal license given to both the Cowlitz PUD and Pacific Core to dam those rivers. And so there are some very elaborate safety requirements that have to be met. So this is carrying out those licensing functions. There's another part of the licensing that requires Pacific Core to provide recreational opportunities in the river valleys that they have dammed up. And so we have all the campgrounds, the boat launches on all these dams, and there is a committee overseeing the recreational side of things for Pacific Core, and Cowlitz County has a member on that board. The gentleman who represents us on that Recreation Advisory Committee for Pacific Core is a member of our Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. a former county employee by the name of Ron Junker. And he meets with them when they meet periodically. So it's all designed to make sure that the license requirements are being met by the dam operators. And I say that
I beg your pardon.
technically, and it is interesting. Cowlitz County has virtually no recreation facilities on the Lewis River because Pacific Corp takes care of it. They provide lots of camping and fishing opportunities that we don't have to worry about. So,
But we now take care of the rest area.
yeah, we just took on the restroom in Cougar. Any other questions? All right. Well, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented this morning.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye. Thank you. Motion items today. We'll start with Public Works.
Good morning. Susan Eugenis, County Engineer. I'm here today to ask for a bid award for the Eric Creek Fish Passage Project. It's a replacement of an existing culvert out on Abernathy Creek Road at milepost 5.37. We opened these bids approximately 2 weeks ago. We received 7 bids, and we are asking to award to the lowest responsive bidder, which is is it Action or Active? Active Construction. There's a copy of the bid tabulation. This project is funded at 100% reimbursable from the federal Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Effective, and Cost Savings Transportation. Yes, I have to read that. I can never remember what PROTECT stands for.
The acronym is PROTECT.
The acronym is PROTECT.
We're here to help you, right?
Yes, PROTECT is the acronym. So we want to move forward with the $1,913,913 to Active Construction.
And in the workshop, Susan, you mentioned that the bids the bid that we accepted was a couple $100,000 over the estimate.
Yes,
Is the federal government okay with paying the difference? You mentioned it was 100% reimbursable.
So it is 100% reimbursable, and the agreement we have with WashDOT for our construction contract has over the amount that the bid is received.
So the last time I was up in that neck of the woods and saw that, there was about a 6-foot drop between the end of the culvert that goes under the road and the stream bed. So far exceeding the ability of the salmon to get into the culvert and under the road and up to the spawning grounds. And this will basically rebuild the road bed and open it up as a bridge rather than just a culvert.
Yes, it will. In appearances, it won't be a bridge, but it's a 20-foot span, open bottom, either a concrete box or a metal arch. We gave the alternates in this construction contract for the contractor to choose. And so there'll be some in-channel work to get rid of the 6-foot drop and put in this wider opening.
The reason I even made it up that far was it was part of a project with the Salmon Recovery Board that I represent the county on. And it was pointed out that up above the basin that is almost ideal for salmon spawning had been the site of a splash dam operation when it was logged probably close to 120 years ago, where they built a dam, had a pond, dumped the logs into it, and then when they were done logging, they released the dam and it washed all the way down and basically scouring out all the soils down to the bedrock, which made it impossible for spawning. So now the conditions have recovered enough that removing that barrier should restore, if I remember, I might be wrong, but I think it's about 13 miles of fish habitat that currently doesn't support spawning.
And that sounds about like the right number. I didn't pull it today.
Could
ahead.
you define what most responsive means?
So there's several items in a public works bid documentation that you need to return, including a bid bond. You have to be a licensed contractor in the state of Washington. Um, There are a couple other that are general requirements. And then in this case, due to the federal money, there is disadvantaged business enterprise requirements and paperwork that is required, some that is required to come with the bid and other documents that are required to come in within 48 hours of the bid. The federal government via WashDOT gives you a disadvantaged business enterprise requirement, and it's a condition of award that you have, in this case, 12% of the work going to disadvantaged business enterprises, and you make that commitment at the bid time.
So some of the criteria are veto criteria. If you don't meet this, you're done.
Yes, if
And
you,
then there are other criteria that you put on a scale of 1 to 10 or something like that?
so all of those are, you have to have this done. So you have to have your 5% bid bond, you have to be registered, you have to turn in this paperwork, or you're considered a non-responsive bidder. And it is laid out in the, this job's first volume of the special provisions. It's all laid out in the front of this document. There's a checklist of which items you need to turn in. And in this case, all the DBE requirements was checked. Our local money, those are not checked. And this document refers back to WashDOT standard specifications, which the 2024 is this book this year.
And the company also cannot have gone belly up or failed to complete previous work.
Correct. There is a debarment list that we also check. If you're on that list, you cannot, it's
So,
usually 5 years.
so there really isn't anything optional in there. Okay, suppose you had everybody, I'm trying to figure out how you're going to decide with people that are with bids that meet every requirement. And how do you distinguish between the two of them then?
So if they meet all the DBE requirements, we are required to take the lowest bid number. So if they meet all of our front-end spec requirements, submitting the bid, we take the lowest bidder.
Okay, and at Cowlitz County, who does all this evaluation?
So it is,
Single person or 2 or 3 people?
there's 2 or 3 people within Public Works. We go through the documentation, and when we go through the documentation, we get the blessing from the state that we did it correctly prior to bringing it to the board.
Okay, got it. And then if you replace those 2 or 3 people with other 2 or 3 people, or this were to be examined in Lewis County, would we get the same result always?
Yeah, if everybody's doing their work right, yes.
Okay. Just trying to figure out what arbitrariness is in there.
The
And-
arbitrariness is in the specs that we have to follow. And that
Oh.
determination of favoring certain businesses that are
Really
minority
good
owned.
point. Yeah.
I mean, that's the arbitrary, not that we made that arbitrary. That was a decision made by the
But
feds.
I
and-
could picture a submittal from this company who has never done anything that resembles what the job is, and this other company who has done this many times before, and they all check the boxes, so how, and the one who you know can do the job has bid $1 higher than the one who has never done it before. You're still compelled to choose the one that's $1 more expensive.
The dollar less expensive, yes.
The dollar less expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. What a system. And those questions are in some way, I mean, that was a very good point. There are lots of times I assume we do that too. When we put out an RFP, we kind of try and guide that as closely as we can to the people we think will be successful.
For an RFQ, when we're getting consultant services.
Yeah.
Excuse me, yes, we do try and guide it towards people we know who can do the work.
Is there an RFQ that always precedes the RFP?
So, when you're doing construction, no. The construction, we just do this one bid document. So there is nothing done prior to that, except if we've gone for outside consultant, there was an RFQ for the consultants to go through the process. But for construction work, there is never anything before the bid contract to actually do the work.
I hate to say this, but the book looks almost untouched.
Well, that's because it's 2024. There's a new one every year. So we're just getting into the 2024 construction season. If you look at some of my past ones, as you see, I started tabbing this book. You look at I think my worst one is the 2020. There's tabs and highlights and items I constantly went to.
Going back to my comment about the FERC letters, it would take you a full-time job, couple of months to compare 2023 to 2024 if you were going to go through line by line, right?
Yes, but one of the things that they have done, it's not in this manual, unfortunately, but I know some of the other design guides and the information that we have to abide by that comes out through WashDOT, when they update it, they put a mark next to the line that has changed. They don't do a line and strike, but if it's a new addition or something changed, there's a line next to it so that you know, okay, this is different from the last version that I was working with.
They don't produce a companion document that says,
Not for the spec book or I know what you're talking about. Some do a kind of a errata, here's what the changes are before you go through it. No, they don't generally do that.
see that one of the reasons to even bring this up is that a lot of times government agencies produce a lot of documentation, but it's always an inward looking kind of thing. And yet they have clients, you're a client, and then these folks are clients. It makes it virtually impossible to, in any finite amount of time, figure out whether we're on the right track or not. And I don't think it's intentional, but it's certainly in the callous category.
Anything else? Entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we proceed with the bid award as has been discussed.
Okay. Got a motion to approve the bid award. Any other questions, comments?
What's the expected completion date of the project?
So, yeah, you asked me the question. I didn't tab in my book yet. How many working days? If I were to guess, I would say that we're looking at an October, November completion date. There is a fish window on this project. So, and there are timelines for ordering your materials. So we're looking at October, November, fall completion date
This year?
this year.
Okay.
They can't even work in the stream until dates in August or something like that?
Yes, they're generally, it depends on which stream you're on, and I don't know this one. They either start July 15th, August 1st, August 15th, and you have 1 to 2 months with a fish window where you can be working in the water. So in this case, working in the water means you divert the stream, you can pull your old culvert, you get your foundation in and your new stream bed in. And then once you're out of the water, you complete your diversion, but you can still work above the water. So they can finish up deck work and railing and things of that item after the fish window.
Okay, thank you. My question would probably be more directed to Commissioner Weber, being that you're on the board of the fish restoration. Were there previously salmon running in that river prior to this 6-foot drop off?
Yeah.
There were, and are
The
there,
6-foot drop off was just the erosion.
okay,
You know, there's a lot of turbulence coming out at the end of that culvert, and that environment was very rocky, and it's just worn away.
so in the years past, there were salmon that ran up that river?
So not since the splash dam,
Okay,
which again, 120 years ago.
yeah. And are there currently salmon that run up to that point in the river,
Past it, yes.
past the
Yeah.
6-foot drop off?
Well, not up Eric Creek, but up Abernathy.
Are there plans to have a fish hatchery or anything put on that creek for the 13 miles of restored fish habitat?
So that is always a good question. It turns out that on restoring wild runs, hatchery fish do not count. They may be exactly the same genetic footprint, but the scientists have said, no, it's the native run. And hatchery fish actually outcompete the native ones. So it's a matter of numbers. So there actually is a research center. It's operated by the federal government up Abernathy Creek, but this is quite a ways past that.
So how many years has that 6-foot drop off existed?
You know, I don't know. I think it was about 7 years ago that we went up there. So they've been looking at this potential opening for quite a while.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is because salmon, when they spawn, they go back to the spot that they were spawned at,
Sort of.
that they hatched.
Yeah.
Within a couple of feet. So I'm just curious as to what salmon are going to utilize this extra 13 miles that we've restored.
So I remember growing up here and being told that exact same thing, that salmon always go back to their spawning ground. The interesting thing that we've discovered is that in those areas where they've actually removed some of the smaller dams, up on the Elwha, which is in Clallam County, and the White Salmon River, within a year, dams that had closed off that river to salmon spawning for 100 years. So these are the old dams. Salmon have returned. So they don't always go back to the last spawning ground. I mean, it's not as automatic. They're constantly searching for spawning grounds. So, so that's why removing the barriers has turned out to be a very successful strategy. Unfortunately, it's really, it's expensive. I mean, we're talking about $2 million in a location that's miles away from, not civilization, but miles away from urban densities. So.
Yeah. Do you know if there's going to be fishing opportunities for sportsmen on that, for people to angle on that 13-mile stretch for those fish? To make that available. I know that in most rivers, native fishing is not allowed. You can't keep native salmon in a lot of the rivers and tributaries nowadays, but I'm assuming that that's going to apply to this same stretch.
I mean, the state works with the tribes and federal government to determine what areas are open to fishing, and it varies. Of course, when the different species have different spawning cycles, so.
And do we know what salmon we're talking about? Are we talking about silvers, Chinook? What are we talking about restoring?
I didn't look that up. I can easily find that information out for you because it's, you can go to the Fish and Wildlife site and they have streams mapped out with what runs at Abernathy Creek, and in this case, what potentially would run up this creek, and I can pull that information if you'd like it.
Thank you.
Wait, on that one, does that mean that the salmon types are exclusive? So I think what our colleague mentioned just smacks of being totally accurate. The stream beds change. How do the salmon know where they were spawned originally to within 2 feet? I think that probably doesn't ever really happen. It's close enough, but, and then in this case, when it just opened up, I can't imagine, I'm trying to think of a mechanism by which says, well, the Chinook are favored here. My guess it's the time of the year that probably plays a big factor. But I don't know, does that mean it's exclusive? The Chinook came here first, they plant their flag and that's it?
No, the maps tell you like fall Chinook, spring, and all the different, because they come at different times, which you can expect at the different times.
Oh, okay. Equal opportunity.
Yes.
So side fact, the Fish Recovery Board that I represent the county on has 5 county commissioners. And each county also has a citizen at large that represents citizens' interests. And the gentleman from representing Cowlitz County's citizen at large is Robert Sudar, who lives just west of Longview and is a commercial broker for fishermen, and is very, very knowledgeable about the patterns and the needs and the various strategies. So.
Yeah, I've heard him speak. He's an amazing fountain of information.
Go ahead.
Can I speak? And so this is a little bit off the subject, but it's related to salmon and it's a concern that's been going on. Is Eric Creek available to salmon if the sea lions are blocking that tributary? I don't know anything about the location of this creek, but I know that there is an issue with salmon getting up some of these creeks. And if we're spending millions of dollars to make it available for them to get through it, it seems like we need to be spending much more money preventing the sea lions from preventing them from getting up. So I just wanted to make that noted.
So Eric Creek is a tributary of Abernathy Creek. And of course,
Okay.
Abernathy comes out into the Columbia. And the Columbia is where the sea lions are hunting for food. And so when the salmon runs, the sea lions know it.
Do we have any way to document how many are not making it up there and what impact the sea lions really are having on the growth of the salmon population? Because I think that's a really big issue before we spend, again, millions of dollars making this available, but they can't get up it unless we do the obvious thing of getting the sea lions gone. And I know Senator Wilson was talking about the fact that actually it is legal in Washington for one of the departments of, is it Fish and Wildlife, to kill them? But they are not using that ability to the extent that they could. So I wish Cowlitz County could be vocal maybe in making a statement to someone about this. It's just my thinking. Thank you.
It is interesting. The federal laws that protect sea lions have kind of favored status. So there are a set number of sea lions that are determined by the federal government that can be taken in that euphemistic word. So they make sure they get the limit, but the limits are in the hundreds. And, those of us who live in the valley know that, we probably need to keep upping that harvest level for the sea lions because they're around. I drove through Astoria, and there's an entire public dock that's covered with sea lions right now, and noisy.
There's a lot of sea lion problem all along the West Coast,
Yeah,
keeping far
so
down to San Diego.
Yeah, so they are monitoring that. In fact, they've done things like remove them and truck them miles and miles away, and almost by the time the truck gets back, they've swum back up to where they're getting a lot of food. So one of the interesting struggles for restoring the endangered species is that there are other endangered species, sea lions not being one of them. They just have their own special protection law. But one of the other endangered species is the orcas, the killer whales from Puget Sound. Their #1 preferred food stock is Chinook salmon. And so the Chinook salmon is one of the endangered species. So to increase the supply of food for the orcas, they have to increase hatchery production of the fish, which compete against the natural stock. So it's a real conundrum. They're trying to figure out what's the best strategy. And of course, Puget Sounders love their orcas, and they have the votes and they get preferential treatment. We'll
So
see.
if I might, by the way, that constituent asked a brilliant question. We should ask that question about everything. In this case, it was a particularly focused question, and I personally appreciate that a lot. Then for my colleague, I've heard estimates, and I'm asking you for what you think is the right number. We know there's a population that spawned, and then and they're the little guys, and finally they make it out to sea, and they come back to us. What's the proportion of the universe that went out that comes back?
So what we've learned with the Fish Recovery Board is consistent with what is taught in grade school, which is where I got my original knowledge. And that is a very tiny percentage make it back. And they're in the 3 to 4%. But it also depends on a lot of variables. Ocean conditions can wipe out even more. And so there are some times when particularly the endangered species are down to less than 1% return. And that's why we're looking for opportunities to restore salmon habitat. And then as Commissioner Mortensen mentioned, the juveniles have a real difficult time making it back out to the ocean. Although they are predators, they're bigger fish that eat the baby fish. And so in addition to removing barriers, the Fish Recovery Board reviews grant applications that do things to shorelines that create, it's kind of a funny little governmental terminology, woody debris structures, AKA log jams, that slow the river down, create refuges for the baby fish to grow and eat and hide from predators along the way. And it's a pretty fascinating process. The bulk of the money going for salmon restoration goes to Puget Sound. And it is frustrating for those of us who don't live in the Puget Sound region, because that's where the most dense, the highest density of urban development is, which means you're not going to be able to restore or remove barriers of salmon streams that used to flow through downtown Tacoma, downtown Seattle, downtown Everett. I mean, the ability for the rate of success is much less. And for those more rural, less developed areas, the opportunity for success is much greater because we're restoring stream beds, but we don't get enough money. And money's being, my opinion, money's being wasted in this Puget Sound area. We have been fighting for it, the board has, and we have had an increase in the allocations coming our way, but it's a political solution, and that numbers count. So a majority of the money gets spent where the likelihood of success is the lowest. So frustrating, but we're actually seeing return numbers improving, and that's great. Down in the Lower Columbia region.
So I've got a follow-up on that. You mentioned earlier that the orcas prefer the Chinook. And I'm going to ask a question based on academic curiosity. How do we know that? Have you seen the data on that, or is that just?
Yeah, I mean,
Then does it really make a difference to us?
The information that I've read is that the orcas prefer salmon. I mean, the Chinook salmon, they'll eat, when they're hungry, they'll eat lots of stuff. They're not as healthy. The Chinook salmon, and again, I'm getting right on the edge of my knowledge and expertise, but the Chinook salmon is very rich in oils, which is very good for animal survival and health. So that's why it's preferred.
So that would tell me a lot, because most of us humans can't tell a Chinook from something else. I know the people here, but apparently the orcas with the more challenging visibility in Puget Sound can tell. They're smart animals.
Well, they just know what to do when they're hungry. If they don't, they don't survive, so.
I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. One is, I used to be a very avid fisherman, and I'm no expert on salmon. However, in more recent years, the returning salmon, they found that of those that return, roughly 5 to 10% of the run are explorers. They don't even go up the same river that they came down from. And so when you take out a barrier, that's why suddenly they will take up that new space. They'll move in there because the explorers are looking for new places to spawn. One of the other things is usually multiple species of salmon spawn in the same grounds, that even though a previous run spawned in there and the next run comes in, when they are kicking their tails and stirring it up, they will eat the opposite species. They'll eat their eggs in competition for that spawning ground, which is what makes, when you're fishing, and if you know what species you're fishing for and you use the eggs from the previous run, fishermen are more successful doing that if they know the colors to use and da-da-da. But the other thing is Elwha Dam. I visited that dam before it was torn out, and it was parked at the top of nearly a 50-foot tall falls. And when they removed that dam, and the Indian tribes that took over that area, there was a hellacious debates about the people that knew and the people that wanted, whether or not they were going to stock it with hatchery fish or just wait and let the natural fish, the wild fish, come back in there. Ultimately, they decided to go with the hatchery fish, but the wild fish can clear those 50-foot falls. So a 6-foot drop doesn't seem to be much of a hindrance for fish, because a lot of them go over falls a lot bigger. Now, maybe the edge of the culvert makes it a problem for them to get in the culvert, but a 6-foot drop to me doesn't seem like anything that's going to inhibit a salmon from going upstream. I guess I think that covers what I wanted to say.
First off, thank you, Commissioner Weber, for your insight into this topic. Question that I have is, we're spending millions of dollars for salmon restoration, and you made the comment that the hatchery fish typically take over a river. What's interesting about that is that we get the genetic disposition and the eggs and the sperm that fertilize those eggs from native fish. And when the hatchery fish come into the river, they're not very particular about which fish they mate with, whether it's a hatchery fish or a native fish. And so it would seem to me that if we're going to spend millions of dollars on salmon restoration, I understand that we need the habitat, but I don't understand why we would not advocate also for putting hatcheries on a lot of these rivers that we're doing this for. And it's the other thing that I find interesting is that we use the term endangered species when I can go to Winco and buy a Chinook salmon wrapped up in a plastic package. So I'm not sure how endangered that really is. And if we want to take an animal off of the endangered species list, it would seem to me that working towards putting more hatcheries on these rivers and increasing the volume and the number of fish that come into those rivers, we could increase the ratio of the ones that return to that river. So it's just interesting to me. And I'm wondering if this board that you're sitting on, if there is any talk about, with regards to salmon restoration, not just river restoration, is there any talk about bringing in more hatcheries, increasing the volume of fish that we produce and let into those rivers?
Yes. In fact, the Lower Columbia Fish Recovery Board operates under the 4H system, the 4 goals: habitat, harvest, hydro, and I always forget one of them. So they talk about the need for hatchery fish because harvest is an important goal,
Mhm.
not only for commercial fishing, but to meet the native population's share, as well as the very healthy sports fishing. So the thing with the Endangered Species Act is that there is a biological opinion that is adopted by the courts that basically set forth the framework of what you have to do to delist a species. And they use scientific advice, and they've glommed onto the idea that it doesn't matter what the genetics are. If they come from a hatchery, that doesn't count towards restoration. Doesn't, to me, and I'm not a scientist by any means, that doesn't make any sense, but those are the rules that the judges have adopted.
Well,
So it's frustrating. So in fact, there are hatcheries, and there are environmentalists who say we shouldn't have any hatcheries because that messes up the whole system. But we can't save the orca unless we do the hatchery production,
Mhm.
because they don't discriminate between wild or hatchery fish. They just want the salmon.
Well, and to Commissioner Mortensen's question, if I'm hungry, I know the difference between a Mexican tamale and a pizza, so I'm able to distinguish which one I want. And salmon do smell and stink, and the orcas know what their choice would be for that meal. But I just have to, it's interesting because when I talk to my kids about this, my 7th grader knows that if we want more salmon, we just need to put more salmon in the rivers, and we have the resources and the ability to do that. So it would seem to me that we would not only advocate for restoration of habitat, but also advocate more for the hatchery production on any river that we're going to spend $2 million on to restore that salmon run. It would make sense that we spend money also to advocate for putting a hatchery to increase the volume in those numbers. Because like I said, once any river that has had a hatchery on it, the term native is just something that the government came up with, because the fish don't discriminate what they're doing when they're spawning. It's not like, oh, this is a hatchery fish, I'm not going to spawn with that one. That doesn't happen. So the definition of terms that the government uses to define these things is also important to understand, and to recognize that those are a lot of the obstacles that are put in place that we have to deal with and overcome. And I understand that. But I would just like to know, and you've answered the question, that we're advocating not only for habitat, but for more fish. The more fish we put out, the greater the returns are going to be. The more the orcas have to eat, the more fish will be in the river for the fishermen to catch. The more fish will spawn naturally in the rivers. So I'm glad to hear that the board is also advocating for that. So thank you.
Interesting, on the board that I serve, there's the 5 commissioners and the 5 citizens at large, that's 10. And then there are 5 other positions that are reserved for environmentalists, hydroelectric companies, landowners, and I can't remember the 5th one, but there's specific interests. So it's a 15-person board, and they're advocating for all those goals. So yeah, and it's kind of a juggling act.
And the sea lion problem does need to be part of that equation also.
And we definitely support harvesting more sea lions.
Yeah, and that was a follow-up. Just because you create more fish doesn't mean you solve the problem. It's because of other circumstances. This is a question for the 2 of you, I think, which is, Robert Sudar is a good speaker, and this topic seems to be something of pretty much interest in the county. Should we have a Wednesday presentation? And if the answer is yeah, I would count on maybe you'd want to ask Robert if he would, I guess, define the problem and maybe his favorite solution and that kind of thing, because this is really interesting.
I'll see what we can set up. Yeah.
Well, is that,
Yeah,
how's that appeal to the public?
the more information is fine. I don't know what kind of power we have over setting anything up, but the information out
The
there.
power's out there.
Yeah, would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fish, orcas, sea lions, what a fun subject.
Want to talk about anchovies?
Perhaps. Got to wonder if orcas eat those as well. So where to begin? You know, it's like, this is what I've learned about orcas over the years. And my primary source is National Geographic because they did a real, one of them magazine articles about orcas. And what they found, what they identified was there were 3 types of orca. One kind eats fish, one eats the mammals, and there's a third kind that lives out far in the ocean. Nobody really knows what they do. That's according to National Geographic. Now, like they had an example of where they captured a baby orca and they had it in their pool and they're trying to feed it fish. It wouldn't eat the fish because it's programmed to eat the sea mammals. And I guess those orcas hunt differently. And I mean, there's just all these different things. And I understand now, I just saw this. I can't remember my source on this, but it's news. They've identified another species of orca somewhere in the waters of Alaska. So, orcas are, a singular term we seem to use, but it's only really one group of a big species. Fish, this is more of an observation than anything else right here. When I was a kid, some of the coolest things I ever did was I would, when the fish were running up the Kalama, me and my buddy would put pins and mask on, and swim down for river and just watch the fish because it was insane. And I mean, it's like you can't imagine. It just the river is just so full. This is when I was a kid, right? At the time, a seal or a sea lion being anywhere around here, that would have made the front page of the news. I mean, that it never happened. They weren't here. But I've got to think back, and if I don't really know, but historically, when we had all these fish, or in ancient times, was the river full of sea lions then as well? I mean, is this what the populations of coexistence look like originally? Don't really know that one, but there's a question for an expert right there.
I do know that in the harvesting of sea lions, the tribes.
Yeah.
Get sort of first crack at it because it's part of their cultural, they were harvesting them.
Sure, I think they
back
eat
in the
them
day,
too.
But I don't know how the numbers compare.
Yeah.
Then and now.
But
I
you
had
give me
one
an
last
idea.
thing that I was
Okay,
trying
go
to
ahead.
think of to say, and now you made me forget. Darn, it was to my conclusion. Now I got to sit here and mumble while trying to think of what the hell I was going to say.
All right,
Uh,
I'll tell you my brilliant idea while
Okay.
you think about it. Ignore what I'm going to say. So I have a plan now. We sneak up to Puget Sound at night and we swap out orcas. The Chinook eating orcas we replace with the sea lion eating orcas.
Yeah,
There you go.
good point. And my observation conclusion is when I was young, we saw these massive runs all the way through my teenage years. Went away to the Army, and when I came back, there weren't hardly any fish left, but there were a lot more people. I mean, it's like if you go to the Kalama nowadays on a fishing time, it's lined. And I was shocked. I came back on leave and I was like, the river is absolutely shoulder to shoulder. And it's like, where did all these people come from?
Do you remember on the Columbia, like just near the mouth of the Kalama, when it's salmon season, I see boats that are gunnel to gunnel
Yeah.
across.
Hog line, I think they call that.
Yeah, did you see that when you were a kid? too?
No. Hardly anybody had a boat. I never saw like these drift boats on the Kalama they have now. When I was a kid, there was no such thing, We used to be part of the entertainment. When I was really little, before I could swim, we'd go to the river when they were upside down and dying, but it was just so many, it was insane.
When
It's a good thing you learned how to swim.
Yeah, it's one of the things Mom insisted on, everybody has to swim because we're surrounded by water.
there is another problem hidden in what you say. When I was born, right about 1948, we had a population in the planet of about 2.3 billion people. and we're pushing 8 now, I think. It's a lot of it, it's a lot of extra food that needs to be eaten. So I don't know how we play in this, because in addition to the sea lions, there are the other trawlers that out there, and goes on and on.
So Tim, one of the differences between now and then was that back when you were younger, when we were all younger, there was a very healthy commercial fishing industry
There
downstream.
was,
And,
yeah,
the use of gill nets, gathered an awful lot of, lot of fish.
true.
And that's been almost regulated out, so that even the commercial fishermen who are licensed living in Wahkiakum don't fish in the Columbia, they go up to Alaska.
Well, I have lived in Alaska as well, and this kind of brings us back around to the road repair part, and the culverts,
Is that what we were talking about?
Now, well, we're talking about fish.
This is
And,
going.
we're talking about fish, and this is all around the roads thing, and, constituent made a good comment about, we're spending a lot of money on this part here where it's a 6-foot drop for a fish. Now, everybody says, and I got to chime in with my little story, in Alaska where I lived, there was a spot in the road, and that would always flood at the fish run time, and the fish would literally just belly across the road. If you wanted to take one of them fish, nobody even cared. You'd have to wait, and it's like time, and there's no break in the fish. Eventually, you drive through this little bit of water and run over a couple salmon, some endangered species on the tires. So my point about the fish recovery thing, and I've had this opinion for a while, it is a little bit ridiculous to say I don't think a culvert slows a fish down. I don't think they care. They get over way more stuff than that. However, we're replacing this stuff with better stuff. And that's the good part. Wherever we do this kind of work, we know it's better, and we're improving our infrastructure. And so you can say it's for the fish, but my positive take of that is we're just getting a better road, in the end. And thank you for that. Any more questions for my expert opinion? I got in a wreck the other day, and I'm like, hardly could make it up here to talk. That's all right.
Anything else?
So I will say that this culvert is an old rusty culvert that needs to be replaced anyway. Besides it being a fish passage, when we're doing and pursuing fish passage, they're generally older culverts that are reaching end of life, and we're just trying to find ways to fund their replacement.
It just happens to be on a stream that
That is
involves
eligible,
fish.
yes.
And Cowlitz County Public Works is known for our aggressive pursuit of these grants. And to the extent, like, this is the way it should be done in all counties to get the job done.
Because at this current point, so the Ostrander box culvert that we just finished was funded with fish barrier removal money. This project is Protect, which was directed at fish barrier. We have Allender Road Bridge, Allender Road Culvert, which is a fish barrier removal board project, funded for design. We have Garlock, which we have Garlock Road Culvert, which we have fish barrier removal board money in and secured for construction. And we currently have North Goble Creek, the North Fork Goble Creek Culvert that has also been funded for design. We have 4 applications in with the Brian Abbott Fish Barrier Removal Board, 1 for construction, 3 for design. We also have 3 additional projects on the new call for this Protect money. These are all older culverts that are reaching end of life that are also on streams that they consider highly important for replacement.
I think that's a good point, because basically we have a list of culverts that are getting into
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
And if they happen to be on a fish bearing stream, then we look outside for this type of funding. We're not really driven by the fish per se. We're driven by the age and the condition of the culvert itself.
Mhm.
So that's how I prioritize them. And then if there's fish and there's money available, sometimes it gets bumped ahead of something that's a little worse because I'll know we'll be able to fund it.
So, sort of ancillary question, what keeps you from doing all of these jobs as quickly as possible? So I
Money,
know you pace things out over the years. What's the driver there?
money is one of the big drivers, working and finding the staffing, the dollars to cover it, just having the staff to design and construct, and then the dollars to do it. So if you look at our annual construction program, we're generally in the 10 to $15 million phase. And of that money, there's generally $2 million of local funds. So you see this one culvert alone costs approximately $2 million. So it's a balancing act of what roads need work, where we can get money to work on it, so we can use our leverage our resources to improve our system.
Yeah, no, I think I understand that, and certainly you don't have the dollars here today, but I'm asking somewhat different focus that I think you're paced by the staff you have and the ability to manage the project.
Yes.
So if somebody dropped another $20 million on your lap, it would still be, things would be paced out because of that limitation, and it would be paced out because of all the permit requirements and SEPA and rules and so forth. So it's not just a money problem.
No, it's a staffing, permitting, it's just a whole process. In general, when we get a project that becomes I guess the old fashioned term, a sparkle in my eye as a project to work, it will take anywhere from 5 to 15 years to get a project on the list, fund it, designed and permit it, right of way obtained, and in the ground.
Thank you. Yeah, that's something we should be able to tackle because the dollars seem to be available. And don't ask me where they come from because I don't want to know, but I do, unfortunately. Anyhow.
What's the life expectancy of the project when you put it in? I mean, you're designing something to go in there.
So the design life of a concrete box culvert is generally considered 75 years. So 75 years is what we anticipate that somebody will have to come back around and fix it. Because of the size of this, it will be considered a bridge. It's a 28-foot span. Anything 20 feet or above is a bridge. So it will be inspected every other year, which is done in-house by our staff. We currently have 64 bridges. This will make 65. So we will inspect it every 2 years. Our current bridge inventory, we have our oldest bridge was installed in 1923, and our newest, the Ostrander Bridge, was just finished a few months ago.
Thank you.
So it seems like if we go back 2,000 years, we can find bridges that were built then. Of course, there's been maintenance along the way and so forth. When I hear a 75-year design lifetime, I'm asking myself, the environment can change, and I understand that, but the culvert itself, I think we have the technology to build it so it should last 500 years. What is it I don't understand?
So the 75-year design life, 50 to 100 is generally what we do culverts and bridges. So it's general breakdown of concrete due to whatever changes is going on in the water, scour when it's bringing down rocks and logs in our bigger
So the
storms.
environment changing.
The
and
environment
it-
changes, and then some of our other bridges, so like the North Pacific Avenue Bridge that we replaced a year and a half, 2 years ago, that was built in 1919, and it was no longer structurally capable of carrying the heavier loads. So the way we use it also changes. I don't know, these bridges may last even longer if we're using hovercrafts and using our right-of-ways as just corridors and we're not putting weight on them. So there's how we use them. We also, a lot of our older bridges are narrow. And we have a lot wider vehicles than what they were using when they
Th-
constructed.
When they become useless because of extraneous factors, I understand that. But I know that the old folks built stuff that lasted a lot longer material-wise, and they had no idea of nanotechnology, no idea of anything. So I'm forecasting that we'll eventually figure out how to build things that will last a little longer. I mean, how old is the Empire State Building? It's about 100 years old now.
Yes,
Are
and
there issues there?
not, I don't know. I will also unfortunately say that my bridge that was built in 1923 is in better condition than some of them built in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of driving at. Lots of things basically to look at and understand.
Well, if you want to look at an example of an aging bridge that is heavily used, the Bridge
Yes.
to Raines,
Yeah.
and that's approaching 100 years, so. And it has a heck of a lot more traffic on it than it was designed for.
I apologize for my reappearance, guys. Samantha, thank you for all the work that you put into this project. It's obviously a very cumbersome project. But my question is, I appreciate Tim's comment about the infrastructure and the new roads, and the new culverts and the new bridges and all that kind of stuff. But the name of this is the Fish Passage Project. So is there a reason, is there a political advantage to naming it the Fish Passage Project as opposed to we're just replacing this culvert?
When you're applying for the grants that are focused on fish barrier removal, yes, there is an advantage of naming it a fish passage project.
So that is obviously something we have to take into consideration when we're moving forward with this, is the
Yes,
fish passage, not just the replacement of the culvert.
correct.
Okay,
And even if it wasn't fish passage money, we are required to build it for the fish passage component by Fish and Wildlife. So even if this was all county money, I couldn't go out and replace like with like because it wouldn't meet current design standards.
so it is.
Which kind of describes the Tower Road
Yes,
bridge situation. That is almost all of our money, but we're having to restore it as a fish passage.
yes, because of that and Pleasant Hill is another one that we couldn't replace like with like because of the fish passage.
And the Fish and Wildlife is the one that determines whether or not the fish passage is essential for that project?
Yes, so we have an area biologist. So when we kick off a project, we go out with the area biologist and we give, here's our preliminary measurement. You have to go out and measure the creek a certain distance upstream and downstream, give multiple cross sections, and then using that, you determine what the clear span of your structure needs to be. And that is the process. And you have to get their approval and permitting in order to build that new structure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion on the floor, so I'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye. Thank you, Susan. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Health and Human Services.
Are you going to begin with a comment on
Well,
the culverts and fish?
I wondered what topic we'll get on down this one.
I know, that was, I don't think it will be as interesting as the fish passage. I'll
I
give it a
have
shot.
seen it. To Tim's point, I have seen an orca in Alaska take a seal right off a buoy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Gina James, Health and Human Services. We have on the agenda today an amendment to our consolidated contract with the Department of Health. We see amendments quite frequently with this contract. This particular amendment is doing a couple of things. It is, the first item is just adding some language, clarifying the title on one of the scope of work. So they just have added in the term state fiscal year 24 ahead of one of the titles, just clarifying that piece. The second item it's doing is related to Group A, closing out the 23 year funding. So they're removing a portion of the funds that weren't utilized. It's about $250.
For the audience, you might want to explain what Group A
Group
refers
A.
to.
We have a role with Group A and Group B water systems. The Group A systems are 15 or more connections, typically your campgrounds, schools, parks, mobile home communities, those types of areas. We have about 65 of those Group A systems in Cowlitz County. We end up doing about 10 to 12 inspections, or we call them sanitary surveys each year. And that's what that's what this funding pays for, to help ensure that they're remaining sanitary, that the things are sealed that need to be sealed, that there's no contamination around the wellhead, those types of things. So it's doing a closeout of those Group A systems. The Group B, these would be 3 to 14 connections on a system. These are typically your smaller private residents who are on a shared well type of scenario. We do a little bit more with these ones where we are doing design approvals, water adequacy. There's an annual operating permit. We do sanitary surveys periodically, as well as testing. There's coliform testing required 1 time a year and nitrate testing required once every 3 years. This funding supports the staff time to do those components, as well as supports water sample testing. So this amendment is adding the funding for this next period for that work.
How many Group B?
We have just over 100, I believe about 110 Group B systems in Cowlitz County.
And the testing for arsenic is included in the testing or not?
We do, yes.
And maybe for clarity, what's the nature that, so this is a consolidated contract, which means
There are multiple scope of works within one contract. So it's a kind of a boilerplate contract with the state, and then they add in different scope of work. So there's one scope of work for Group A, there's one scope of work for Group B water systems. It also includes a foundational public health services scope of work. We're sort of working with the Board of Health on that piece. So it includes multiple scope of works within one consolidated contract.
so the dollar amounts, do you have them handy?
Yes. So the dollar amounts in this amendment with Group A, they're removing $250. That's from the 23 funding allocation for Group A work. And then for Group B, they're adding $25,230, and that's the annual allocation for our Group B work.
Do those dollars reflect any change in policy or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
And then the total consolidated contract, what's that value?
Oh, the total consolidated contract is about 4.4 million.
Now that's, if I subtract these numbers, the 4.4 is over some amount of time.
Right. It gets a little bit confusing because there's different funding periods and funding allocations. There is in the attached in the agenda, we have kind of an overview that helps to describe the funding a little bit. So we try to simplify it.
And if the public were interested in finding out the details, they would find it on your website?
Yes. Yep. It's attached. This particular one is attached in the agenda for today's meeting. And I believe it's also on our website. I'll have to check that.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the contract amendment 21-070, number 10, with the Washington State Department of Health, as described by staff.
Okay. We got a motion on the floor to approve. Any comments? Well, come on. Where are we gonna go on this one?
I told you it wasn't as exciting as fish passage.
Is there a relationship to the people who eat salmon? Are they more inclined to be in a group A versus a group B?
How many camps do we have by salmon bearing streams?
That's even better, yeah.
Where does the discharge?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you clean the
that's a-
fish,
that's a-
does it drain
whole
back
different
into the
division.
well?
It could contaminate the well and then we'd be, yep.
Okay, I'm not seeing any. We'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye.
Okay, Thank you.
Gina. Okay, that's the end of motion items. Couple things. We have no meetings tomorrow. Just a bid opening, but no open meetings, so, nothing going on. Then next Tuesday, May 7th, 10 o'clock, we will have a Board of Health. We'll be on schedule for 10 o'clock 1 week from now. That's the updates I see, so it's, open to you. If you have any comments or anything.
I'll just make one earlier, Commissioner Weber, you talked about Cowlitz PUD operating SWIFT 2. They own SWIFT 2. However, Pacific Corp operates both 1 and 2 as one project to maximize the efficiency of them. So Cowlitz doesn't operate it. They contract with Pacific Corp to run it. Just a minor detail.
Thank goodness it keeps our electric prices relatively lower than
They work at
most
it.
others.
Just out of curiosity, do you remember what the all-in cost of the power that comes from, say, the PUD one on a kilowatt hour basis?
I'm not sure I understand your question. What the current price
So
is?
if I want to build, if I want to, if I want to produce electricity, I'm going to have to, it's going to cost me so many cents per kilowatt hour. And that's going to tie into how much I'm going to have to charge you, the user, for it. So we know that wind-driven stuff is 25 cents a kilowatt hour if you're lucky. And we know the old coal fire plants were on the order of 2 cents a kilowatt hour, and nuclear power's around there. What's the cost here typically for the?
Right now, the blended cost, they're running about, I think it's about 0.3 of a cent per kilowatt hour. By the time it gets to the residential rate payer, is, what is it, 6.25 cents or something right now.
You said 0.3, you actually mean 3 cents? Or
3 cents, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the different resources and the different costs. I don't even know right now, after they had to rebuild SWIFT 2, I don't know what the cost of that is. I know it went up quite a bit because of the damage there. And then as I recollect the lawsuit, that the failure of that canal, the contractor was found not guilty of the construction of that. So that was 100% of that cost for the rebuild fell back to the PUD. I don't know what the final outcome of that was. I'm sure that power coming out of there right now is fairly expensive power coming out of SWIFT 2,
Yeah.
but I don't know what it is.
Do you remember what they quoted us for the methane conversion project? How much that was gonna end up costing?
For like the
For
landfill?
our partnership.
No, I'm not even sure I ever heard one, because that's the kind of number I would latch onto.
Well, Steve asked that question when they were in here, and didn't they say it was like 1 cent difference, basically?
Yeah, it was gonna be within 1 cent of their current.
Of the mix or their lowest, or?
of their mix.
See, the mixed price includes a whole bunch of stuff that's really expensive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But the hydro is still your uh, uh, cheapest resource with no environmental impact. And then nuclear. But nuclear seems to be so far out of fashion right now. Uh, Personally, I think that the newer developments and stuff going on with nuclear, my goodness, I can't imagine why we're not looking at small nuclear projects when they can put it on submarines and they can put it on aircraft carriers and we're trusting what an aircraft carrier's got 5,000 to 6,000 people on it.
You
And
were a PUD commissioner at one time?
yeah, from 82 to 88.
So in that time, how much did we lose? Going back to the nuclear reactors, we generate electricity at the Grand Coulee Dam, and by the time it gets to us, how much power have we lost?
Have we lost?
You're right, just the transmission losses.
Oh, the way they calculate that is technically the power is used the closest to the facility. But depending on who's buying the power and what they call wheeling cost to get it a resource online, and then the wheeling cost, like if California was buying it, they just have to pay the cost of the combined resources to get the power down there. And depending on how far away it is, then they calculate the miles from the resource to the user. And that I haven't stayed up to date with how they're doing those contracts now. I used to have a pretty good idea, but how they're doing that now with putting the wheeling costs into it and charging the net user, I don't know.
Okay, but in general, there was a time when low temperature, or in this case, probably high temperature superconducting was an area of big interest because line losses were substantial.
Yes.
Was that an active area at the time you were?
Yeah, they were looking at it really hard if they could get the superconductor to work efficiently and at a cost that they could afford. And just like they've been looking at new power lines, putting in additional power lines through the county. I think ultimately in 82, the Washington Public Power Supply System nuclear plant project that had us having to build a hockey stick growth pattern that they predicted was an enormous amount of need for energy that has never developed. For where we're at now, keeping up with it is not a big deal, but at the same time, you can't just ignore it. You have to be building some type of resources, especially if you're shutting down your coal-fired and petroleum-based plants.
Of course, there was one major industry that disappeared on us that consumed enormous amounts of electricity.
The aluminum plant.
Industry.
Yeah.
You know, the Reynolds plant here in Longview consumed as much electricity in a day as was consumed by the entire city of Portland.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just enormous. And that shutdown has helped us continue to thrive, although it was very costly in this community. But
And the aluminum plants were built at wartime specifically for aluminum for planes for the war project. And then as that went away, one of the things that went into that was all of the aluminum plants had what they called quartile contracts. So that on a moment's notice, they could receive notice from the Bonneville Power Administration to say, you're going to lose 25% of your power. So they called them in the quartile, they could take away 25%, 25%, 25%, and ultimately shut them down if it was necessary. And those contracts came about during the war, and they were just always there right up until the plants were shut down.
And as a result, those direct service industries paid less
Yes,
for the power. So that was one of the ways we helped encourage the aluminum industry to stick around for as long as they
absolutely.
could.
And I suspect from an environmental standpoint, the recycling of aluminum is a very good thing because you don't use anywhere near the power to take it out of aluminum ore to make aluminum. You
Yeah,
already have
and
aluminum.
and the production of aluminum has become a much more efficient process than what it was 80 years ago. That'd be good.
So just recapping, why I went down this a little bit is because, as you point out, we've got nuclear powered ships, we got nuclear plants that are fairly well constrained. I think I don't recall ever hearing of a problem with, or I should say a fatal issue of any kind. So we have the technology to, instead of showing our vulnerability across one monster plant, we could manage our own resources with a rather local nuclear power plant.
Absolutely. The only problems that I know of, major problems, well, 3 Mile Island was kind of a fluke. Chernobyl was a tragedy that, just the way that, what do they call that, a carbon block reactor. The failures of those projects, catastrophic though they were still controlled enough and didn't have any major impact. They, not to say they didn't have any type of impact on people and the environment, but it didn't turn out to be a tragedy that was not fixable. Today, unlike 40 years ago, the big concern was, what are you going to do with the nuclear waste? And there was all kinds of problems where the federal government promised to deal with the nuclear waste and never developed a program to handle it. But today, it seems like that this is much more controlled, much more strict, and much more efficient. And they've got things into a system, like we talked about on the submarines and the aircraft carriers. The military is able to figure this out. Obviously, the technology is there. It's something that we should definitely be looking at on the local level.
And if you compare options, you start looking at number of people that have died as a consequence of a nuclear power plant, I think is close to zero.
Yeah.
And if you look at the coal-fired plants, they're much cleaner now. In fact, I think China has another 150 coal-fired plants in construction or with plans for immediate construction. Anyhow, even though it's cleaner, the number of deaths from coal mining and the particulates in ignoring carbon dioxide it's a large enough number to notice.
Yeah, the last numbers I saw, China is completing a coal-fired plant, 1 a week. That they're building them so fast right now to keep up with their demand. They're completing a coal-fired plant once a week.
Hopefully they're using the proper scrubbers to take the particulates out of the air.
Yeah, let's hope.
I've yet to hear of somebody who's visited China to come back amazed at how clean the air is. It's pretty rancid.
My good friend who was the president of Qualcomm China lived in Shanghai for a while, and in each room they had an air processor. Each room of the house, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, fish recovery, Chinese air pollution.
I know.
Let's see where else. can we go?
You're gonna like these. Just 2 quick facts, Washington DC related. So the guy
If
that,
you're going to talk about aluminum, don't forget Venezuela has bauxite reserves that are substantial.
oh,
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
keep that in mind. So the guy that built the Library of Congress is the same guy that built the Washington Monument, that completed it. So an exotic metal at the time was aluminum. And if you go in the Library of Congress and you look at the filigree work that they've done, it looks like silver. It's actually aluminum. The top of the Washington Monument, that last little pyramid, is aluminum. And it's protected by 4 platinum lightning rods. that's how rare and exotic aluminum was, you know, back in the day. So anyway, back on to one of my other areas where I happen to be an expert is, and I shouldn't make myself laugh. Anyway, this talk of nuclear power, it's not nuclear power, should not be our future. We have I got to tell you that, you know, people want to consider this a green fuel, you know, the mining of uranium and the processing of uranium is hugely, gosh darn, labor and resource intensive. I worked in this industry for a while, and I can just tell you, it's no different than mining coal, really. I mean, at the end of the day, now you get more bang for your buck out of the uranium you dig up, but the fact is, you still got to dig it up and process it, move it around. The fuel that we have in abundance, especially around here, I've said it before, natural gas. You know, what we have sitting in the ground in natural gas, we're burning it, you know, at the oil wells, they burn it off because it's like, why don't we have free electricity? That's my point of view of as much of this gosh darn natural gas as we got around. I know the states rub against fossil fuels, and they should be the same rub against fossil fuels as they are against nuclear. Any of us that live through whoops, I think there's some here, you can see the just what goes into the nuclear is so technical and so resource intense that it's not really an answer for the future. I've heard the pitch about, you know, your local neighborhood having a little aircraft carrier size nuclear reactor nearby. Honestly, kind of don't want that in my neighborhood, to be, you know, to tell you the honest truth. But natural gas, man, you can just tap the ground. We've already got it. We've already got the pipelines. I mean, the infrastructure is there. And what the state is doing by trying to phase all that out, you know, that's just like ridiculous.
Well, you know, you want to look at the holistic cost involved, and I don't know where that number is. I like natural gas, and I think I have mentioned where our natural gas prices in the US are like $2.50 per million BTU, and they're about $12 in Europe, and with a great deal of fluctuation. But let's not forget, a lot of our natural gas comes through fracking, and there are some people who have concerns over fracking. So it's not easy.
Well, I'm not sure about the term, a lot comes from fracking. I mean, if you've gone through where they drill in oil, you see they got a flame burning of natural gas that's just a waste product as far as they're
Oh,
concerned.
yeah, for years and years,
and
they
that's just-
torched off.
That's just coming out of the ground.
Yeah,
I know in Lewis County, there's a huge
I-
reserve right there.
I know this, they wouldn't be fracking for natural gas if they didn't have to.
Okay, I don't have enough knowledge about, I can't argue that point with you.
And then
I mainly came up here to tell my cool aluminum facts.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying to impress the chairman that we can migrate the topics.
There you go.
And from nuclear power could include fusion. You remember several years ago, maybe several decades ago, desktop fusion was a big thing.
No, but you know, I do have something to say about fusion. I was gonna, you know, not say it because I was gonna talk about aluminum, but did you know that, I think it's Stanford, but it's one of these major colleges, they have, completed a fusion process, and they've done it more than once on an experimental level, but they are getting out, I'm trying to remember the exact number, so don't quote me on this part, but they're getting out more than they put in, which is the
Yeah,
goal of fusion.
For about a picosecond.
Well, you know, it's,
Got to start someplace.
they said it couldn't be done you know?
No, they never said it couldn't be done.
I think one of the principles of engineering, it must be one of these gosh darn Newton's laws or something that says you're never going to get out more than you put in.
Well,
No,
I just
actually, it's-
hope that those listening heard you correctly, that you have volunteered North Kelso for a site for an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, an aircraft
Did
carrier.
you say that?
Sure, sure. Let's dredge the Cowlitz, bring one up there. You know, they can purify water. They could supply all of North Kelso easily with electricity. Plus you'd have all those sailors that could come out, you know, and help out like my house. I could use some paint. I wouldn't mind a roof. Those guys could mow my lawn. You know, and I'd feel good about supporting sailors if they were doing that for me, you know. The Navy SEALs could dive into my backyard, have the mower all ready for them to go.
Going back to nuclear power, you can look at a chart that's going atomic number versus the binding energy. And there's a peak at iron, and it's a very steep climb from hydrogen up to iron. And anytime you fuse hydrogen into helium, you get a huge amount of energy. And that's all you get is energy. You don't get any other byproducts.
Yeah,
If
that-
you're doing fission, you're going from uranium on one side, like U-238 or whatever number it is, and you break it down and you got all these components there, and you haven't even climbed the peak up to iron. So the yield of a thermonuclear bomb is substantially more impressive than the fission bomb. Someday I'll be able to speak clearly. I'm still counting on that.
Work on that. Well, I was gonna just say that the experiment I was talking about of the fusion one, that's what they did. They had a hydrogen molecule and then they shot so many lasers at it. And then it did just what you just said, and I can't even repeat it now, but yeah. I mean, there's bright future out there. I think one of the pluses for the micronuclear thing they talk about is that they can somehow process expended fuel. I think that's one of the catches. There's one of those other elements in there that they're using that's not quite so radioactive.
It's a
And,
thorium, yeah.
But it takes a lot of processing to bring that back into fuel kind of usability.
The thing about the fusion is how to contain it.
Yeah, well, the guys conducting the experiment, that, you know, naturally they're happy, but they said, we just don't have the infrastructure to really scale this up right now. But, you know, it's an interesting point, you know, that they could do it and they got out more power than they put in. I mean, that's the goal.
And that's the goal of us using your taxpayer funds. We put in $1 and the taxpayers get back out beyond $1.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Or we're not successful either.
True. But government, you know, you guys don't make a product really. You just produce stuff like roads. And they're doing a good job on that.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah. Just before I adjourn, remember, no BOCC meetings tomorrow.
You've got a Q&A? That looks interesting.
Will you please address the workshop with Longview City Council, and if you intend to actually participate in one? I did participate last Thursday with a half-hour workshop with Longview City Council. They asked our entire board. I was the one that was able to attend. I thought it was, yesterday when we were sitting here talking. I kind of enjoyed it. I don't have any problem with that. I go to most council meetings with the cities. in our county anyway. And the chance we just had a chance to sit down for 30 minutes. The question that came up, during that particular meeting, was on the emergency, shelters for extreme weather, cold and heat. Because the entity that provides that now is burnt out. I mean, you're talking about a volunteer organization, and over time, they just get burnt out. And so the conversation was just kind of, what do we do from here? And there was just thoughts and ideas thrown out. Because I was the only representative, you know, I made it clear at the beginning that I don't commit this board to anything. I don't have that authority or power, but that I think sitting and having the opportunity to just chat with the Longview City Council, it wouldn't matter what council, any of the city councils was I think it was a good experience, and I think it was fine to do. I'm not sure exactly what they're wanting from it. If you just want my thoughts on it, I think it's something I wouldn't hesitate to do again if a city just wanted. I think the idea, the topic they landed on wasn't the topics they sent me they wanted to talk about, but 30 minutes, I don't think you have much time. I think it's mainly a one topic type thing, and you can do on that. So I think if you have these, if they'd like to do these in the future, and they have one specific topic they want to talk about, I think that's fine to do. Yeah.
If I may, as long as I've been on here, I don't recall any time any commissioner did not view working with the municipalities as a bad thing. We all looked at it as a good thing. I don't think it was reciprocated. And that's something that it puzzled the heck out of me. The only reason we did not attend is because there are legal logistics
Yeah.
reasons, and we really cannot have a joint meeting.
It's
As
very
long as
difficult.
two of us or more are there, then it becomes it's a public meeting, has to be announced as so, and then if we have any official capacity in there, then it becomes a board meeting, and that requires other stuff that would be in conflict with the municipality and their city council kind of meeting. So when we saw that, it was natural for
Yeah.
Rick to be the one to attend. It's not like Dennis or I had no interest. It's just,
Yeah,
we're
true. And
practical.
I didn't mean to sound like they didn't have interest.
Yeah.
That's exactly the case. It throws some real complications in, and I didn't see our job as to go and infringe on their meeting. They wanted to talk about something a little bit before their meeting, and I think I was the one that did this one. Any one of us could do that. I don't think we'd have any hesitation if a city wanted to do that, but
and if they came here, we'd have a discussion just like we always have discussions.
So, my understanding is that, in the regular meeting, they did vote to disband their housing homeless program
Right.
and apply to return the dollars back to the county
yeah.
to disperse. Was there an expectation then that we would, spend their money any differently than we have in the last several years?
Well, it probably depends on what council member you talk to. Some of them are, keep harping on and it's a fact that we chose not to put county dollars into, the Hope Village project because, and I think it might have been you pointed out, it wasn't because we didn't feel like there was proper controls for that. I think you pointed that. I could be wrong. But And I thought that was one of the things they planned to talk about, and it didn't go there. I never have any hesitation if they want to talk about those things, I'll talk about them. I've said from the beginning, my job is to be honest and open with what I think. Your job is to decide whether you like that or not. You know, I can't make that decision for you. But I'm always open to tell you what my thoughts on it.
I wasn't in the workshop, but I did get to the meeting a few minutes late, and personally, I got rather irritated that a couple of those council members were trying to get you to come to the microphone and commit to a position as a commissioner. And I guess my question to you would be, because of that workshop and the invitation, is there any way that could have been all three of you attending that? Because that was almost a complaint from them that you guys didn't all show up to that meeting. And I was rather ticked off that I don't know how you would make that an open public meeting to meet the requirements for the meeting notice, make it a public meeting for two joint, you guys and the city council. I was stunned that with some of those comments along those lines. So is there a way that could happen? Both of you guys as legal commissioners and the city council sitting together to make a workshop decision?
It's possible, but it creates, as Commissioner Mortensen pointed out, some logistic and procedural issues, because you're basically two separate
Entities,
meetings running
yeah.
concurrently, and you just it can be a little bit convoluted.
And we can't even have an official board meeting if it's not in the city of Kelso.
Because Kelso is the county seat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Well,
didn't even think about that.
actually, that's not true. We can schedule meetings elsewhere in the county. We just have to have notice. We had a meeting years ago in Riderwood to approve a county ordinance allowing golf carts on the public roads up there. And that was appropriate to have a meeting like that. Was so locally focused for the folks in Riderwood to have a meeting up there.
What constitutes public notice? The paper and the radio, and
And
what kind of lead time does that take?
Not very much.
we
Kelly takes care of those things and details for us.
It's 24 hours.
oh, so it's not long.
So as long as it's posted the day before, and it's up probably on your website and then in the paper the day before, you're good to go? Okay.
The awkwardness is having 30 minutes for a meeting that is supposed to lead to a decision. I mean,
Yeah, that was
We-
ridiculous to think
Yeah,
anything was
we
gonna
just
happen
don't
in 30
operate that way.
minutes.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that in 30 minutes. I don't know if I answered the person's question, but when you're just looking at a 30-minute block of time, I think it needs to be a single subject, and it's just a discussion, just throwing out ideas and thoughts, and it just provides information to the public and stuff. And then after that, you can take whatever from that point on.
Okay.
Anything else?
There's a fair amount of misinformation on the on the contracts that we passed up on. And there were a couple of things in there that the city of Longview made non-negotiable. And it really amounted to the county was to pay the bill, and that's all. They had no say on anything else. We've worked hard here to make sure that every contract had a termination clause on it, and that was refused. We also were told The only thing that would be entertained is a location in Longview, specifically the location that where it is now. So it wasn't anything portrayed like an even-handed discussion. It was, you got a pot of money, you give us the money, we'll take care of everything else. You'll be responsible for paying the bills and any consequences. That's not much of a cooperative stance in my book.
Yeah. Commissioner Weber mentioned that they did vote to send the dock fees back through the county. We learned, I think, the day before or whatever, when Kathy was sitting, whoever was sitting down with that we expected dock fees for this year, and these are estimates, depending, am I saying under 700,000, 680 or something like that? Yeah, lowest in a number of years, and I think the amount that was projected to go separate to Longview is about 170, right in that area. So, from my understanding, the funds that have already been put over there, which is about 170, will stay there. It's just future stuff that comes in. And by the way, and we've said it before, but just for the record, we didn't really give an opinion on what they should do. We just said, we'll support what they decide and work with it. And we didn't, it wasn't a thing we were asking for the money back or we cared if they kept it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I mentioned earlier that we really didn't play a territorial game of any kind. And even during this area where they thought they had gotten what they wished, including the dock recording fees, we still granted funds across into Longview. Had we stuck by the concept that they were trying to press, we would have said, no, I'm sorry, we can't fund that. That's in the city of Longview. That comes out of your own dock recording fees. We didn't do anything like that. We try to look at the value of things. And really, as soon as we start playing the territorial games over which we have options, then we're not doing you the right thing. We should spend the money with the result in mind, not the politics in mind.
Just to piggyback on what Steve was talking about, I think that it's important to evaluate whether or not there's going to be a net gain from all of you meeting with the city of Longview before you go through whatever the proper procedures are to make that happen. But in saying that, I also do feel that we just found out that it might not be as laborious and difficult to make that happen to where there is a public meeting with them and the possible, I think that it might go a long ways, not only with the Longview City Council, but with voters to see an effort made on the part of the Board of Commissioners and the Longview City Council to work together, to collaborate, to see if they can come up with something to do whatever is necessary moving forward, if that's something that is that's possible. Granted, it's going to take a couple more steps to make that happen, and we have to weigh whether or not there is, like I said, value in that, if there's a net benefit to it. But I don't think that it's something that we should just put off the table because it's difficult to do, and there might be extra, steps or legalities to it. If it's something that's possible and we can do it, and there's a net benefit, I think it might be something to consider.
Yeah, I don't know how to address that. We've got a pretty lengthy analysis from our chief civil deputy, and there are just some logistic issues aside from all that, but that level is of officialdom is only required if people aren't willing a priori to just talk to each other and figure out what's going on. That gentleman goes to every city council meeting that is possible, that he possibly can attend. How many city council people do you see out here ever? That's gives you sort of an indication that it's not a one yeah, and it,
Just keep in mind that city council members have jobs, other jobs. They're not full-time employees of the city. So their ability to come to meetings like this is not possible. So, you know.
You saying
be-
I don't work.
Huh?
I'm teasing you.
right, but also, there are plenty of opportunities to view the proceedings, there are plenty of opportunity to send emails, there are plenty of opportunity to suggest stuff, and if it doesn't happen, then in a joint meeting, which was the initial proposal, I was enthusiastic, and I think everybody here said, sure. Think about who's going to chair that joint meeting. How binding can those decisions be in a joint meeting? So joint meeting isn't even the right name. It's like we invite you to come to our meeting, which is what actually happened. And it wouldn't bother me to have them invite all of us, and then we would have to invite the clerk of the board to come, and we would all be at the meeting, but anything we do there would be unofficial, unless he was chairman, in which case we'd have to have the meeting here. Everything is negotiable and understandable, but uh, it, it really needs a discussion that hasn't taken place.
Okay. His follow-up was similar to some of the comments we've had on here, so I think that was answered. Anything else? Okay, once again, no meeting tomorrow. We are adjourned. Thank you.